effectively, we are asking the Saudi Arabian government to live up to its own obligations that it itself has assumed as a state party to the Convention on the Prohibition of Torture, to a member of the international community who joined in the march in Paris.
The comments of Irwin Cotler, a member of Canada's Liberal Party, also acting international legal counsel for Raif Badawi, urging the Saudi Arabian government to live up to the message of the march in Paris a few weeks back and release the Saudi blogger. Badawi sentenced to 10 years in prison and 1,000 lashes after being arrested back in 2012 for insulting Islam, cybercrime, and disobeying his father. Now, alarming reports from his family. The Saudi courts want to retry him for a new charge that might result in the death penalty. For more on this developing story, let's bring in Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy and the author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim's Patriot's Fight to Save His Faith, and also, for purposes of full disclosure, my doctor. So, Zuhdi, you were on our program earlier. You publicly volunteered to take lashes for Mr. Badawi. With the possibility of this new conviction, do you believe this is a direct result of the international pressure that you and others tried to bring to bear on Saudi Arabia?
I really think so. And I think right now they see that the world is distracted with Iran. You see Secretary Kerry on his way to Saudi Arabia to do another one of his genuine, and they're allowing their judiciary, which the king and the royalty claim to be separate entities, but in fact we know it's the same. They tried to whip him in front of the mosque in Jeddah and did it once, and the world exerted a lot of pressure, not only our letter and demands to take his place, but all of a sudden he was no longer brought in front for that, but yet they're not going to allow their population to witness that somehow they've succumbed to pressure. So what they did, remember, Raif Badawi was originally arrested for apostasy, and that his work somehow insulted Islam and made him no longer a Muslim. They set aside the apostasy and somehow more compassionately were going to whip him instead of killing him. And now they're resurrecting the apostasy, saying, okay, we won't do the flogging that's done publicly, but we'll just go ahead and kill him behind the scenes. And I think it's because the president, our president Obama, has not brought his name up, and they're seeing an opening to take care of this while we're distracted with Iran.
You mentioned the no comment from the president. We do know 67 members of Congress signed a letter to the King of Saudi Arabia urging the immediate cancellation of this current sentence, saying it would be important to do so to show the commitment of Saudi Arabia to the international community and basic freedoms. Will the Saudi king pay any attention to this letter from 67 congressmen?
I mean, what's amazing is the amount of momentum globally. We now see this amazing bipartisan letter of 67 members that have sent this, and yet you had Saudi columnists just yesterday congratulating that same Congress for receiving Benjamin Netanyahu and listening to his warnings about Iran. So they're listening and they're paying attention to Congress, but yet when it comes to their own hypocrisy and barbaric way they treat dissidents, they're going to ignore that. So you know there's a cognitive dissonance, and the only reason that's being facilitated is because they look upon President Obama as a paper tiger, distracted by Iran. They say that they need him. We need them in the battle against Iran and against Al-Qaeda and ISIS, so therefore we're going to ignore the draconian prison which exists in their societies, and we need to keep the pressure up. And I was very proud of that letter from Congress because it really showed that we are standing behind our convictions of trying to bring light to what's happening to people like Raif Badawi.
Zuhdi, Amnesty International recently reported that Saudi Arabia has held 39 executions thus far this year. That number is 3 times more than last year's number at the same time of year. Do you have concerns about this?
Boy, I can't tell you. I mean, it's beyond concerns. By the way, those executions were beheadings done in a chop shop publicly. These are barbaric. When people say, where did ISIS get these? You know, the president talks about the Islamic State. as some type of aberration that's not Islamic, and yet the Islamic Kingdom of Saudi Arabia does that, and they execute people with beheadings. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation is based out of Jeddah, and yet the so-called rule of law in Saudi Arabia is about how to suppress dissidents, how to create a republic of fear that doesn't allow any type of expressions of criticism. Because at the end of the day, JD, Raif Badawi's organization was like ours. He wanted to have a critical mass in Islam, to question authority, to modernize our scripture. He criticized Hamas. This cybercrime he was arrested for was because he hit the like button on a Christian evangelical page. I mean, that's when people talk about why Assyrians and Christians are being killed by ISIS. They can't carry Bibles, they can't worship in Saudi Arabia, and Muslims who try to protect them are arrested for cybercrimes.
Zuhdi, another report from Washington sheds more light into Saudi Arabia, specifically a prison that houses primarily convicted terrorists. But these terrorists are showered with perks. And, for example, each prisoner's family on welfare, and the inmates have very comfortable cells, if you want to call them that. Should we remain allies with Saudi Arabia, given this kind of paradox about allowing convicted terrorists to live very comfortably in captivity?
You know, I'm so glad to see so much of this finally being discussed publicly that many of us Muslim reformers knew was the problem. The Saudi regime, as Prime Minister Netanyahu laid out to Congress, is part of these Game of Thrones where they share the ideology of the terrorists. They create these monsters, but the problem is they want their tribe to run the country, and they want these populist radical movements not to create movements that take them over and topple them. So on the one hand, they whack them with their military apparatuses, and on the other hand, they protect them and give them welfare because they realize that it's their ideology that creates it. So, you know, one thing I wanted to bring up is look at the Keystone Pipeline that we now rejected an ability to override the veto. There was a huge national security issue in that if you want us to no longer be frenemies with these countries that are fueling our destruction and have within them values that are contradictory to our values, have us no longer be dependent upon their oil, because that's the only way to make them change their societies and reform.
And on that note, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, we thank you for the time. Again, Zuhdi is the author of the book, A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim Patriot's Fight to Save His Faith. Dr. Jasser Skyping in there from Phoenix, Arizona. There is more to come here on America's Forum right after this Newsmax Now update.